We have many guests with us today in chapel, as today marks the beginning of our Centennial Speaker Chapel series, which will take place over the course of this next year. Our featured guest today is Dr. Ann Smith, and our own Dr. Kimberly Majeski will be interviewing her today. Ann Smith is a treasured gift to the church and to Anderson University. She and her husband Nathan served as missionaries for almost 30 years. Ann has been the director of church relations here at AU for part of her life and also a member of the board of trustees. But most importantly, Ann is a voice of wisdom and love. She's a pastor and a mentor and a friend to people literally all over the world. In recent months, I've had the great opportunity of getting to know Ann, and conversations and stories told around her kitchen table over a cup of tea have impacted my life in ways that I can't even begin to put into words. And so, students, friends, I am so anxious for you to meet my friend, Ann Smith. Will you welcome her to Anderson University?
So we're so thrilled to have this conversation with Ann today. I want to tell you, first of all, you want to get your smartphones out because you're going to have lots and lots of tweetable moments. So do that now.
Wow.
So Ann, this is our first homecoming conversation, and you are our very first guest. And we are excited to hear about how God has worked in your life, how AU has worked in your life, and we literally are gathered around you here to just listen to your stories.
Well, I feel the warmth, and I love the prayer time before we came out on the stage to be surrounded by not only people who work at the university, but students, and they prayed for me, and I feel his presence, and for that I'm grateful.
Good, amen. So let's start off, Ann. You've told me some stories, you've told others of us stories, but I want the wider community to hear this morning. Tell us what led you on the path to Anderson University, which was then Anderson College.
Well, before I do that, let me tell you that my story is not just Ann Smith's story. This is a story of God and Ann. We are writing a story, and we are still writing a story. And whatever I may share with you, just know that God is the one who has journeyed with me throughout all of this, the good times, the bad times. And one of the things I love about him the most is he doesn't waste anything. He takes my worst moments, he takes my embarrassing moments, he doesn't waste anything. Well, I'll have to give you a little background. I grew up in Alabama, in Bessemer, Alabama, the youngest of 5 children, and grew up in a home that was full of love, but did not have what a lot of people think are essentials for life. Books were not a part of my life. Education was not talked about. Music was not a part of my life, but the church was very much a part of my life, and that's where I learned so many, many things. When I was 16, my father went fishing on the day before Mother's Day, and he and the companion who was fishing with him in the boat were both drowned that day. And both of them drowned that day, and so that changed my life drastically. My grandparents had lived with us for quite some years. My grandfather was already in his 90s. My mother had maybe a 4th grade education. Somebody had, because by then the older siblings were all gone. I was the one at home, so it was my grandfather, my father, my mother, and me who were left, besides all the people who lived with us at various times. Anyway, somebody had to work and make money to buy food, so it fell to be my lot. So I quit high school and went to work in the steel mill in Fairfield, Alabama at the age of 17.
Age of 17, and so what grade were you in school?
I did not have my senior year. I just had my junior year, but I did not have my senior year. I went to work in the steel mill, and this is a part of the story I need to tell you. Back in June this year, I went back to that steel mill and saw that gate for the first time. The last time I walked through it was 68 years ago. The first time I walked through it was 74 years ago. An emotional moment for me to stand there and reflect on what it felt like as a 17-year-old who had grown up in the church, had no idea of what a steel mill community was like. I walked through it with great fear and trembling. It was heavy work. This was in 1942. During World War II, we were making steel plates. I was working in the physical testing laboratory, and we were making steel plates to build ships. Anyway, it was quite a moment for me to go back and visit that and to see that gate for the first time in 68 years, and learn and see in a different perspective what God had done through the years. Working in the steel mill did a great deal of damage to my body, and at a very early age I had to have surgery, so I was off from work for 4 months. And so we charged groceries for that 4 months, and when I went back to work, the first job was to pay the grocery bill, and then I would start paying my surgeon. We didn't have health insurance, of course. And August the 7th, actually, I became aware of that in June, the exact date. August the 7th, my grandfather died. That left my mother and me.
Right.
Just the two of us. And my wonderful mother, we had been through a terrible love-hate relationship during the early days in the steel mill, but had become great friends. My mother said to me, "Honey, I know how much you want to go to school. If you can find a way to go to school, you go, and I'll do laundry and take care of myself." I knew she meant it. We both were grieving the loss of her father, my grandfather. But I owed my surgeon a great deal of money. But because I believed my mother, I had the courage to walk in and say to my surgeon, "I owe you a great deal of money. But more than anything else, I want to go to school."
And you were in the steel mill for how many years before?
6 years.
6 years.
6 years.
Unbelievable. And then you saw a little chance open, and what did you do?
Well, I said to the surgeon, "I want to go to school, but I owe you a great deal of money." And he said, bless him, this wonderful Episcopalian doctor who prayed for me every day. He said, "And if you can find a way to go to school, you go. And 10 years from now, if you can start paying me, that will be fine." Now, I had never even been to Tennessee, much less Indiana. But I grew up in the Church of God, and I'd heard about Anderson College. So I packed my suitcase and made my way to Anderson College and showed up and said, "I'm Ann and want to go to school." And I'd never graduated from high school.
And you came to Anderson College and said, "Ann, I want to go to school." And how did your time here, how did your entrance into this place and your time here in this community help you along your path?
Well, Dr. Karl Kadatsky had an enormous impact on my life. First of all, he gave me tests to see if I was college material. Of course, they had to let me enter with, it was provisionary, whether or not I could do the work. And the very first week I was here, I got a job at Gospel Trumpet Company working on the card line from 11 at night till 7 every morning, which, since they don't have classes in the middle of the night, that was wonderful because I could go to school in the daytime and work at night. So it was a wonderful setup for me. But Dr. Karl Kadatsky, that whole first year that I was a student at Anderson College, I'd go to the basement of Old Main, and I would find little scraps of paper in my mailbox, and they would say things like, "Good job, Karl Kadatsky. I'm proud of you, Karl Kadatsky. I knew you could do it, Karl Kadatsky." He believed in me. He saw in me what I could not see in myself, and I love him for it. And I love Anderson College for welcoming me.
All right. So you came from the steel mills of Bessemer, Alabama, to Anderson College, admitted as a provisionary student.
Yeah.
And then you began to flourish. Where did the path of coming to Anderson University, then Anderson College, take you?
Well, it changed my life forever. Well, it's hard to tell you how much difference it made. And I have to tell you, I just discovered something this week that I'd never really been aware of until this week.
Tell us.
Anybody who knows me well knows that I love one-liners. I just love one-liners. Every time I read a book, I usually remember one sentence. And I had never known where that was birthed in me until this week. And I went back, I was revisiting my days at Anderson College, and I had a professor that every time you walked into his classroom, he had a sentence on the board that was very powerful, that you couldn't get away from. And that began to live in me. That's where it all started. And I love these one-liners. One of the ones that I've recently been processing that I absolutely love is by an Indian philosopher named Kashimurti. And he says, it's no measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society. I love that. You know, that's something I can pull out all along, and I do this. Whenever I have a moment, these come to me. Peggy Milken says, you never touch another person so lightly that you don't leave an imprint. And recently I read one by John Ortberg that was just wonderful. He says, one of the hardest things in the world is to be right and not hurt other people with it. Oh. Isn't that incredible?
That's incredible.
You can process that a long time.
You could. It occurs to me that you were born before your time. You were a Twitterverse person before the age of Twitter.
Well, I love those one-liners. They speak to me in a way that, one that I've been dealing with a lot recently is by Elizabeth, what is her last name? I've forgotten her last name, but Elizabeth, and she says, whatever lowers self-esteem increases hostility. Take that with you and deal with it.
That's good.
It's an incredible statement. And particularly in this day and age when we have the technology where you can lower self-esteem in other people anonymously.
Right.
Yeah. So anyway, but it changed my life in so many, many ways. But that's something I learned this week, so I couldn't help but share it with you.
No, I love that. And one of the things we love about you, Anna's always talking about being a constant learner. I know that you want to talk more about that. Before we get there, tell us what you did, what happened in your life. How did your experience here begin to help you light the path for others? Where did you go when you left Anderson College, and what happened?
Well, one of the things that happened to me by being in Anderson and a student at Anderson College, the love of my life had already graduated, was doing graduate work because we didn't yet have a seminary. And so he was doing graduate work at Butler School of Religion, which is now CTS. But anyway, I met the love of my life. That changed me forever, forever. Still changes me. Though he has not journeyed, physically he's not journeyed with me for the last 13 years, he still impacts my life. So that was a gift by coming here.
For the people that don't know, who was the love of your life? For those of us who don't know, who was the great love of your life?
Oh, Nathan Smith was the love of my life. We had 53 and a half years together. Nathan was in Japan in 1945. He went in immediately after the war ended in August. He went in October, fell in love with Japan, came back to Anderson College to prepare to go to Japan. So that is a connection also. But before I graduated, actually, because the missionary board was ready to send someone to Japan, Nathan and I went to Japan in the early part of 1951. 65 years ago, we were living in Japan. Anderson College prepared me for that in ways that are difficult to explain. But I look back at those years, and then when we came on home assignment, then I came back and graduated, and then I went on to do graduate work and other home assignment times. But I had the wonderful privilege in Japan, and this is one of the ways that Anderson College has a much broader impact than just what it has done for my life. After we'd been in Japan some years and I'd completed my graduate work on home assignments, I was teaching in a very large university, about 20,000 students, not feeling particularly fulfilled by that for some reason. I'm not altogether sure, but a state school, Saga University, contacted me and asked me about coming in for an interview. They were interested in maybe hiring me as a teacher. I went in to meet with the administration there, and one of the first things they said to me is, we have religious freedom. You cannot propagate any one religion. They knew I was a missionary, of course. I was there on a missionary visa. They said, we cannot propagate any one religion. So I said, I hear that, I honor that, but before we continue with the interview, you need to know something about me. Everything grows out of my faith. My view of the world grows out of my faith. The way I treat people, the way I try, the kind of atmosphere I try to create in my classroom, the way I solve problems, everything grows out of my faith. I can't separate myself from that. That's who I am. I hear what you're saying, I honor that, but you need to know that about me. And then if you want to continue the interview, that's fine. We continued the interview and they hired me. I taught for 1 year, and this is amazing to me, absolutely amazing to me. The Faculty of Education came to me and said, would you be willing to teach Bible as background for English literature? I remained calm on the outside. Inside, there was like a little rubber ball bouncing up and down. It was just so amazing.
In 1951, Japan. Yeah, 1951 in Japan.
Well, this was later on in Japan,
Okay,
but
amazing.
first went in 1951, the early part.
But this is big deal that you're able to be asked to teach Bible.
Oh, it was amazing, absolutely amazing. I don't know of anyone else who has had that opportunity.
Ever.
And I was able then, before we moved to South Korea, I was able then to teach for 10 years. But I did say to the interviewers, I did say to the Faculty of Education, I will teach one semester. Well, first of all, I need to tell you this. I felt totally unequipped to do that. I sent out a desperate plea to everybody at Anderson College that I could think of and said, send me resources immediately. And I learned more than the students did, I'm sure, in the process. But it was a wonderful experience, and I can illustrate this. Well, I need to tell you this first. After teaching one semester, they evaluated it with the students, came back and said, we'd like to make this a year's course, and it will be required for all students in the education department who will become junior high school and high school English teachers. And I had only one student in the next 10 years who had had any exposure to the Bible. It was a wonderful Catholic family, young woman who really knew her Bible. But let me illustrate this. This is Anderson College. It's the ripple effect. Anderson College invested in me, and believe me, they invested in me. I can't tell you how grateful I am for the investment. They invested in me, and then I invested in the students there, and then the ripple effect goes on. I can illustrate it by telling you about one day in the class, a class of juniors, by the way. And I said, you know, this particular author, one of his favorite stories was the story of the prodigal son. Well, get this blanket, nobody had ever heard of the prodigal son. So I said, let me tell you the story. And I told it very simply. There was a man who had 2 sons, and I went on with his story. And nobody but me had ever heard the story, so I got all caught up in it. It became fresh and new for me again. And I got down to that part of the story where the father was running down the road to greet his son, threw his arms around him, hugged him and kissed him, and all of a sudden I sort of came back down to earth, and I looked at these juniors sitting there. They were sitting there, the tears were rolling down their cheeks. One young man to my right said, is God like that? And I very simply said, yes, God is like that. Then I had to go ahead and teach. I'm not allowed to evangelize. But the story, we become so familiar with the stories that we lose that edge, that real deep meaning that's there. So.
And what would that have been like for students in Japan hearing about a father running down the road to their son?
Well, there's an old proverb in Japan that says there are 3 things to fear: fire, earthquake, and father. And I talked about a father who went running down the road, didn't ask any questions, didn't give any judgments. He just said, welcome home, son. Threw his arms around him, hugged him, and kissed him. Talk about grace. Yeah.
Well, we're so glad you didn't do any evangelizing in Japan. And I know that you spent time as a missionary for over 40 years. You were in Japan, 30 years, and then in Korea.
Well, we were in Japan for 26 years, then we had one term in South Korea.
Okay. And then I know you came back here to the States, and your life with Nathan kind of took a turn. And sort of in these last, I think we talked about 20-some years, you took on a new role that was just as important.
Just as important.
Tell
Just
us-
as important
tell us
as
about
anything
that.
I've ever done. Nathan was diagnosed with multiple myeloma. And they told us that perhaps 6 months to 2 years would be the limit of his lifetime. Nathan lived 16 and a half years. It was the most incredible journey. Actually, I had both a brother and a sister who died with Alzheimer's. So I had actually, between Nathan and my siblings, I had 21 and a half years of caregiving. Wonderful journey that I cannot tell you. God just takes everything. I really do believe that everything that comes into my life, the good, the bad, the wonderful, the horrible, is all the raw material for growth, if I allow it to be. And he just never gives up. He's constantly stretching me and changing me and growing me and teaching me and giving me new insights. But I tried to find a word to describe that journey. It was such a wonderful, wonderful journey, but sometimes it was the opposite of wonderful. I couldn't find a way to express it, so finally I put two words together that I'd never put together before. It was a wonderful nightmare. And I would not change those 16 and a half years for the whole world. What we learned in the process, the closeness, the incredible learning experience about God and about each other. And the world around us tells us what we ought to think and what we ought to feel, but what we need to be more than anything else is real. One of my favorite experiences, should we talk about this or not?
I think we should.
Okay.
Should she talk about this?
One of my favorite experiences was when Nathan first got cancer, everybody said to me, my wonderful Christian friends would say to me, you must be strong for Nathan's sake. You must really be strong. And I wanted to be strong for Nathan's sake. It sounded good to me. But what I quickly learned was that what Nathan needed from me was to be real. And one of my favorite experiences was after his back had collapsed and he accordioned, had lost about 6 inches of his height. We did not yet have a hospital bed, so he sat in a recliner 24/7. And I cooked dinner that evening. We had dinner together, spent the evening together, and when it was time to go to bed, I knelt down beside his recliner there, and we had prayer together. And I crawled in bed. It was perfectly dark in the room, and I was lying there, and the tears were rolling down my cheeks, and I heard Nathan say in a little voice over there in that recliner, "Are you okay?" What do you think I said? "Sure, I'm fine." Liar. In a little bit, I heard Nathan say, "Are you crying?" Well, I didn't think the first was an untruth, but I thought if I said no, I really would be lying. So I said yes. And I remember he said to me, "I'd give anything in the world to hold you." His bones were so fragile. I got up out of bed and I laid my pillow across his chest so I would not damage those fragile bones. Reached down, picked up his arms, laid them across my shoulders, and I sobbed. I sobbed like a baby, and he cried with me, and I remember his words so well. Aren't tears wonderful? They're a part of the healing process. I learned something very important in that, and it's not a lesson, and I will clue you in, friends. You don't learn a lesson, have it forever learned. You learn it in every new situation. I learned that I needed to be comforted, but Nathan needed to comfort. We both needed that time. It was a wonderful memory, wonderful memory. of crying together. And later on, we were invited to speak at Noblesville Hospital to cancer patients and talk about our journey and how we were dealing with cancer. And it was a middle-aged man. I said in this time we shared together, I said, it's okay for men to cry. It's not about being strong and thinking you've got to protect your family. It's about being real in this journey and learning and discovering all that you can learn in this difficult, difficult time. And this middle-aged man came up to me afterwards, and he looked me straight in the eye, and he said, I've had cancer for 2 years, and I have felt like I had to be strong for my family's sake. We do not talk about it. We do not. Thank you for giving me permission to cry. Wah! And I reached out, wrapped my arms around him, and we stood there and cried together. Being real is one of the hardest things you will ever learn to do. But it's so critical to your journey. It's so critical to your journey.
I knew you during that time period, and you were just as joyous and just as present as you are now. And you found a way to live with joy and sorrow.
There are some things I hope those of us who are older and those of us who are younger, I hope all of us learn. And that is that we live in a both-and world, and we need to embrace that. Life is both pain and joy. It's both. And you can't have one without the other. If you shut out the pain, you shut down in order to not feel pain, you also can't feel joy. So I hope you learn that. There are other things I hope you learn. I hope you learn early on. I wish somebody had told me way back how to harvest my failures. There's such richness and wisdom to be gained from failure. Learn how to harvest your failures. Nothing is wasted in God's kingdom. So
That's beautiful. How about now we shift to these people in the audience, these people who are here now at Anderson University, these people here who will go out and change the world just like you have done. What are your words of encouragement to them this morning?
There's so many things I would love to say. One is take the time to get acquainted with you. You are so important. You are so unique. There never has been another you, and there never will be another you. But unless you get to know you, in all honesty, you will have a bumpy journey. Learn to know yourself. Learn to love yourself. Learn to just bask in how much God values you and how much He loves you. He loves you more than you will ever fully be able to comprehend. Another thing that I would love to say to you is that finding answers is not the most important thing in the world.
Preach.
Rachel Rimmen has a statement. Rachel Rimmen wrote a book called Kitchen Table Wisdom. That's a powerful little book. She says, my father rewarded me for having the right answers. My grandfather rewarded me for asking the right questions. Learn to ask questions of yourself. Learn to ask the questions. Be honest with yourself, but always be asking questions. Seek God more than you seek answers. I believe that one definition of faith is the ability to live with unanswered questions. I am so excited because I don't have all the answers. I am so excited because I'm not complete. My journey is not about being complete. My journey is about being full.
That's right.
For that stage of life. Let me tell you how I happened upon that expression, full but not complete. After Nathan died, I had a flashback. We were sitting in his little gray Studebaker on Anderson College campus, and we were talking about love and marriage, and Nathan made a statement, and I'd never thought of this all the years we were married. This was only after he died. And I heard him say, I just heard his voice. He said, honey, you say you love me with all your heart, and I believe it, and you believe it. I say the same thing. But what we both need to realize is that 5 years down the road or 10 years down the road, however long God gives us, we'll look back at this time and know we didn't know a whole lot about love. Wow, that was so wise, but I was young and in love, and it went in this ear and right out the other ear, and I never remembered it again until after he died. And I heard this, and I thought, that's interesting. I was full of love sitting there in that little gray studio. I was full, but my love was not complete. 53 and a half years later, to compare this with this, oh my, so different. The intimacy, the oneness, all that we'd learned and how we were contributing to each other, so different than when we were sitting there. Anyway, and then I thought, wow, that's what the spiritual journey is about. It's not about being complete, it's about being full. For that part, where you are in this journey right now, it's being full. I am so excited over being incomplete. You know, if I were complete, God could put me over there in that corner and say, I don't have to fool with Ann anymore. She's a finished product. And where would I be? You know, it's these new discoveries. It's this new journey. Everything is new. God's always doing a fresh thing. And he's saying, and you haven't even scratched the surface of what there is to learn. And I haven't. So be excited about not having all the answers, because you're on a journey. But there is that something that pulls you forward. And it's because God has so much more than you've discovered yet. So I would say to all of you that would be one of the things. And there's so many others, of course, that run through my head.
Right, so we'll just have to have you come back. Is that good? Yeah?
So there is something that is running through my head that just takes me a little bit by surprise. But it applies to the people who are in the audience who are older, but it particularly applies to those of you who are younger. I don't know who wrote it. I don't know when I first came across it, maybe 60 years ago, maybe 70 years ago, I'm not sure. But it's a little thing that says, isn't life wonderful? Isn't it grand? Here, take it. Hold it in your hand. Laugh with the love of it, sun sweet and whole. Squeeze every drop of it into your soul. Isn't life wonderful? Isn't it great? You can always start living. It's never too late. For those of you who are older, don't think it's too late to start finding this incredible presence in a way that you've never experienced it before and learning something new. For those of you who are young, don't miss the journey. It is a journey. It is a process. It is a discovery. It is a learning. It is a becoming. It is God at work in you. Don't belittle yourself for where you are. Celebrate where you are. Be full where you are, but be open to what the next step is and what is out there in the future for you, because it is a wonderful journey. I can't wait to see what he's going to teach me throughout the 90s. I'm sure he's got a lot of things in store, and I want to be open to receive them.
So Ann Smith, prophet and priest and mentor and friend and treasure to this community. We love you and we bless you. We know that after long you'll have to get to Pilates class. But after this session, we're going to invite you all who are available to join us in the Edwards Dining Hall for lunch and a conversation with Ann. But before you go, would you, whose life has taught us so much about discovery and the gift it is to continue to learn, would you pray over us this morning as we go?
I would love to do that. But before I pray, let me say to you that Anderson College did something for me in 1948. They had no reason to welcome me, but they did. I love it for what it gave to me then, but I also love it for what it gives to me right now. I love living near this campus. I love encountering students. You help to keep me alive. You help me to stretch. You teach me things that I am so grateful to learn. Some of them maybe not so grateful. But I love it. I love it. And I'm so grateful for Anderson College. It reaches around the world in its impact. It's not just Anderson, Indiana. It's a worldwide influence. And I thank God for being a part of the Anderson College family. Let's pray. God, we so feel your presence in this room. We are so blessed. We are so grateful. Sometimes words are so inadequate. I wish I knew the story of every student in this room, how they got here, what they struggle with. Every single one of them is a story, and they're writing that story day by day by day. Oh God, guide their hands as they write. Guide their spirits. God, remind them that it's not an indication of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society. And God, there is sickness in our world. There's pain in our world. And you call us who are followers of you to be a part of the solution instead of a part of the problem. Oh God, will you wrap each person in this room in your loving arms? Make them to know how very loved they are, how very valuable they are. Whatever their situation, they are loved. And you look beyond the obvious and you see the potential and you call it forth. Will you be with every student as they journey during this time on this campus? Open their hearts, open their minds, open their spirits. God, knowledge in and of itself can be good and can be bad. God, I frankly confess, nothing excites me more than a brilliant mind focused on the right things, but nothing scares me more than a brilliant mind focused on the wrong things. Come and invade the minds and the hearts of these students and dwell in them and teach them and help them to know how to harvest the failures and how to handle the successes. God, be with every professor, every administrator, every person who walks this campus in whatever role they walk it. Invade us with your spirit, with your love, with your understanding. Give us excitement about the journey, not the kind of excitement that's just but something that's genuine and contagious and alive and non-judgmental. God, save us from being abrasive with our faith. Make us contagious, we pray. We would not exchange the journey we've had with you for anything in this world. And we want every person to know that the journey is both pain and joy. But oh, it's so good because we journey with you. And you don't waste anything. You don't waste our pain. You don't waste our struggle. You don't waste any of that. But you weave it into the fabric of our lives and make our story something that is worthy of being shared. Not because of who we are, but because of who you are. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So God, wrap each person in this room. Hold each one so close that they can feel the very beat of your heart and know that it beats for them. And that you will journey with them all the days of their lives. Give us openness to receive what you have to teach us. We love you. We thank you for this place. And God, I really do believe the best is yet to be. I get goosebumps when I think of the students, how far they started at a different place than I started. They'll go places, they'll do things, they'll experience things that I can't even imagine, but I'm so excited for them. Help them to place their hands in your hand and to journey with you and allow them to be the salt and the light and the leaven. Teach them, God, that their call is not to destroy darkness, but to share light. Only light can destroy darkness. Hold them, Father. Hold them. Love them. Teach them. Stretch them. Just be so present with them that they will discover the joy of the journey. In the name of Christ, I pray. Amen.
Amen. Go with God.